Good morning, I'm Matt Driskill, editor of Asian Aviation Magazine and AsianAviation.com. Welcome to the latest In Conversation, sponsored by Metrojet of Hong Kong. Today we're speaking with Sami Jauhiainen from Neste. I hope I pronounced everything okay. He is the Vice President for Renewable Aviation Asia Pacific at SAF maker Neste. Sami, glad to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here today.
Now, tell us about the company a little bit. I mean, I obviously know a lot about it because I just edited a big story that's going to be in the magazine coming out pretty soon. Sustainable Aviation Fuel, or SAF, as everybody calls it. It's been in the news a lot lately. Give us the background on the company and what are you guys doing with sustainable fuel?
So Neste is originally a Finland-based company, set up 1948 after the Second World War to secure Finland's oil supplies. Our journey to renewables and sustainable fuels really got started in the 1990s. Neste developed in our own R&D center this technology to convert biomass, oils and fats type of raw material to high quality fuels. And from 2005 onwards, we started investing in this new technology. In a quite short time frame, we built renewable refineries in Finland, in Rotterdam, in Europe, and then in Singapore, where we started our facility in 2010. And today, renewables are the major part of our business. We are the world's largest producer of sustainable aviation fuel, renewable diesel, as well as renewable raw materials for polymer and chemical production.
That's interesting. I was at the recent, I don't know if you were at the recent aviation festival in Singapore. Sustainability came up. We had Tony Fernandez, we had the chief operating officer from another airline. We had the chairman of Thai that was there. And they were talking about, do passengers really care about sustainability? There seemed to be a general agreement among the panel members that yes, there are a certain sector or a section of passengers that do care about it, that will pay the extra dollar on the ticket for offsets if the airline offers that. Things like, I have my own opinion about offsets, but that's another story. Why is my email inbox full of press releases from airlines talking about the ability to fly on SAF? And should airlines really care? I mean, should they care? I mean, if the passengers don't care, why should the airlines?
Well, I guess first of all, there is a good reason to worry and care about climate change. If we look at the target to stay in this 1.5 degree warming trajectory or anywhere close to it, the carbon budget left is getting reduced, and the effects of climate change are increasingly becoming visible around the world for all of us. I guess the real question is, what is aviation's contribution to that? And on the one hand, one could say that it's only 2 or 3% of global CO2 emissions. But unfortunately, that doesn't yet give the full picture alone. On the one side of the problem is that aviation is likely to continue growing while other sectors in the economy have clearer pathways towards net zero. And it is estimated that 2 to 3% could be over 20% by 2050 if enough sufficient action is not taken. And on the other side, carbon dioxide is only part of the problem. So aviation's climate impact already today is estimated to be 3 times larger than carbon dioxide alone because of all the other emissions of aviation in high altitudes, such as nitrogen oxides, contrails, and the cloudiness that have a climate warming impact. So aviation has an impact, and what we are seeing in the surveys is that increasingly passengers, the general population is recognizing it, and also here in the aviation, in the Asia Pacific region.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you brought up 2050 because I'm a bit of a cynic and a bit of a skeptic about things. Everybody talks about the 1.5 degrees increase. I've been doing a lot of reading about this because I've been green for a long time. My carbon footprint is very low. I haven't owned a car since 1997, so I do pretty well. But 2050 to me seems too late for aviation. People have already been talking about we're not going to hit the 1.5 degrees. That is, that's the target. But you look at everything that's happened, all the recent UN meetings, so on and so forth. Is it hard? I mean, I know it's hard for aviation to move faster because of the infrastructure that's built in. Hydrogen, which we'll talk about later, but that's not going to be coming back. But SAF seems to be on everybody's mind at every conference I go to. It works on planes, it works on helicopters. Pratt & Whitney has shown that, Rolls-Royce has shown that. Why are we not seeing more SAF? And I know you're going to tell me it's cost, it's things like that, but what's holding SAF back?
Yeah. No, I think those 2050 goals, I do share your view. It is great that we have those. We have those from the International IATA Air Transport Association. We have those from ICAO. So there is a broad alignment also from the governments that this is the right way to go. But 2050 is far in the future, and definitely I think message from my point of view is that there's no time to waste, and the benefit of sustainable aviation fuel is that it is a solution available today to start reducing aviation's emissions. It is ASTM certified drop-in product. It can be used in existing aviation fuel infrastructure. It can be used in existing aircraft and engines without any investments or modifications. So we can start today, and I think what is really needed from industry is that we set these intermediate goals towards that 2050 that ensure that we are on the right track and progressing sufficiently fast to be able to meet that.
I mean, airlines have really been sort of in the crosshairs of environmentalists. You had the flight shaming in Europe. I think France has even talked about, any trip that is under 2 hours, you have to take a train, which I lived in Paris for 2 years. So when they're not on strike, they're really good, but I've been having a lot of strikes lately. But aviation to me seems to get a bad rap. Again, you talk about 2 or 3% of total emissions. If you talk to Willie Walsh at IATA, he says 1.5 to 2%. So he's a little bit less. But ocean cargo, ocean shipping, they use some of the worst fuel in the world, bunker fuel, which is like, tar or whatever. I mean, it's just thick oil. Concrete producers, industries like that. It seems to me airlines or aviation in general is really being made the poster child for this. Why don't we hear more about these other industries?
Yeah, no, I think we hear, of course, a lot about those as well. But I think you kind of touch it. Aviation is just it plays a very important part in the society for businesses, for economy, for bringing the people together in the world. And for a very long time, it has been a bit maybe too convenient to just ignore aviation's climate impact and contribution. We haven't really had binding emission reduction requirements for aircraft. We haven't had around the world requirements to use biofuels or sustainable aviation fuel. We haven't had really strict targets for emission reductions in the airports. And the reason is then that aviation is maybe 10 or 15 years behind road transportation, for example, in starting this journey of decarbonisation and looking really those solutions that can help tackle aviation's own emissions, rather than thinking that offsetting is a solution and an option to tackle those.
The key challenge. Yeah. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
the key challenge you asked earlier, what is really preventing this? It does come down to the cost side of things. It is just very difficult for airlines to just make the choice and switch to a lower emission fuel like sustainable aviation fuel, which costs more. Fuel is maybe 20 to 30% of their total cost base, if their competitors are not required to do the same. So cost is a fundamental issue. Regulations will probably need to play a big role in tackling that. But on the other hand, it is also the responsibility of aviation's end customers, companies with business travel activity, air freight or individual passengers, to do their bit and to tackle their carbon footprint and of course through that enable the airlines to be more sustainable.
You mentioned a good point. Regulators. I actually worked in Washington for a year for the U.S. congressman, which I lasted a year and I couldn't take the BS, so I had to leave after that. But they started implementing fuel mileage requirement in the U.S. at least, years and years and years ago, to kind of say, okay, the car's got to get more mileage, it's got to be more fuel efficient. Airlines are starting to, or OEMs like Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, et cetera, they're working on the fuel efficiency of this. But you see the same thing with electric cars. There's got to be some incentives, whether it's tax relief or whether it's some other kind of incentive for most businesses that I've been covering business for 40 years now. They're not going to do anything unless they can either make money at it or unless they're forced to by the government. So it's one of those two things. Can governments, what is keeping regulators, governments from either giving incentives like tax relief or whatever? They do it in the U.S. for corn growers to make ethanol, right? Why can't the government, whatever government, whether it's Singapore or whether it's France or the U.S. or whoever, what's holding them back from providing these kinds of incentives or, a carrot and a stick? Either you go to SAF or you pay a penalty. What's holding that back?
Yeah. No, this is the important question, and the fundamental challenge is about the cost of sustainable aviation fuel. So it is higher than conventional jet fuel. Of course, it's partly because the market is just in a very early stages of development. So once sustainable aviation fuel scales up, for us as Neste, for example, we can do 100,000 tons today, but by end of the year, our production capacity will already be 15-fold, 1.5 million tons across Singapore and Rotterdam. And when we scale up that production, when the supply chains become more efficient, SAF use becomes normal in the airports, clearly there is a lot of efficiency gains that we can achieve. But it still looks like that SAF will remain more expensive than fossil jet fuel. So there is this green premium to be paid for the emission reductions. Now, governments can definitely play a role here, and what we are seeing some of those developments being taken. For example, the U.S. government is already expanding this kind of tax benefits and credits just to kind of make the price gap a bit more narrower for airlines to adopt sustainable aviation fuel use. We are seeing also airports around the world aggregating, for example, Heathrow in London, Schiphol in Amsterdam, aggregating some funds from the fee income they collect in the airports to incentivize airlines that take sustainable aviation fuel use. And these are really important steps in getting the market going. However, fundamentally, if we look at this in a longer term basis, the key issue will be for the people and companies who fly to take ownership of their own emissions and pay for the cost themselves. And this is the value of the regulations. If regulations say that we just need to gradually ramp up this share of jet fuel that is replaced by sustainable aviation fuels, ultimately all the airlines will need to take it into use and move it to their ticket prices, and that's the kind of long-term sustainable way to drive the industry towards its emission reduction goals, and of course then provide the necessary market and demand certainty for the required investments in sustainable aviation fuel production capacity.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to take a break real quick. But when we come back, I want to ask you about offsets and put you on the spot with that. But Sami, we need to take a quick break here to hear from our sponsor, Metrojet of Hong Kong. We'll be right back after this.
We're going to have the crown jewels of Asia, and I promise you, we're going to have the nicest and busiest business aviation hangar in the region.
And we're back. We are talking with Sami, and I have to look at this again, Jauhiainen.
Jauhiainen.
Jauhiainen, okay.
Well done, Matt.
Sorry, I was close. Vice President for Renewable Aviation in Asia at Neste. I was going to ask you before the break, but had to wait till after it. A lot of airlines are saying, okay, passengers, you can offset carbon by paying $1 more for your ticket or something like that. The carbon offsets have been controversial. Some projects don't work. Some projects, maybe they do. I mean, they really, in the industry, I don't really want to say it's a shady enterprise, but some carbon offset, people say they just don't work. Do you agree, disagree?
Well, clearly there are different kinds of carbon offsets. There has been some of this critique. Are all of them delivering the benefits that they are supposed to? That's a kind of important question to ask. At the same time, fundamentally, the concept can deliver some good environmental benefits somewhere. So it's not that carbon offsets are bad fundamentally, but of course where the issue gets problematic is if the offsets become an excuse of dealing with one's own emissions and delaying action on those. The right way to use offsets is to focus their use on those last remaining emissions that you can't tackle anymore. If you take into use all the means, all the levers you have to make your activities, and in the case of airlines, the aircraft, the fuel efficiency, air traffic management, as efficient as possible, scale up the use of sustainable aviation fuels, then that's the right place of offsets to deal with the remaining emissions. But yeah. That's the thing. If they become an excuse for not taking action, then they are actually harmful.
Okay. I'm going to combine a couple of questions. Let's talk regions, and if you want to talk which airlines are your customers or which ones are really taking it seriously. Where is your SAF being used more? Is Asia better? Is Europe better? Is the US doing better? Or is it kind of equal all the way around? And can you name some airlines that may or may not be your customers, but that you think are really sort of leading the way with this?
Well, certainly it is true that at the moment, Europe, North America is further in terms of sustainable aviation fuel use. So airlines there have a longer time been testing on the use of sustainable aviation fuels. Many of them have had time to develop these kind of offerings to their own customers that they use to aggregate funding from them to purchase sustainable aviation fuel use. We see also governments providing more support or requirements for use of sustainable aviation fuel in Europe and North America. But Asia Pacific will be in a fundamental role. This is the world's biggest aviation market. Any kind of industry goal to achieve net zero 2050 is just never going to happen unless Asia Pacific plays a major role. And unfortunately, we are seeing many encouraging developments in the region. So Neste supplied our first sustainable aviation fuel in this region in October 2020 to Japan for ANA. Since then, also Japan Airlines of Japan has taken our product into use. Last year, we made our first delivery to Singapore Airlines to the Changi Airport in collaboration with ExxonMobil. Also to Air New Zealand, to Auckland Airport, also in collaboration with the local energy company Jet Energy, to Malaysian Airlines to Kuala Lumpur, and also Cathay Pacific in Hong Kong took our fuel into use. So we are seeing this very positive momentum for airlines taking these steps in SAF adoption, and we are seeing also the governments, looking at it from the point of view, how can we start encouraging the use of sustainable aviation fuels to tackle the emissions of our aviation sector, and also how do we ensure that Asia Pacific plays a major role in this new industry as a producer of these kind of new fuels that have a role to play in the energy transition. There's a lot of raw material potential in this region to play a big role.
Really quickly, what about China and India? I mean, China's a huge market. India is going to be third largest aviation market if it isn't already. Are they seriously considering SAF? Are there big projects there that I've not heard about?
Well, definitely these markets are going to be these kind of big needle movers, or how to say. So when the time comes that they take sustainable aviation fuel use, create the policies and regulatory frameworks that establish the markets, when talking about China, for example, that will of course have a big impact in this industry. We are clearly seeing that the airlines and the energy companies in this, and as well as the governments, are discussing the topic, and I would hope to see that translates to concrete action and roadmaps for the future in the near term.
Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit. Hydrogen, that seems to be on everybody's mind. Airbus is spending a lot of money on hydrogen. It's not anything new, though. There was actually, the Soviet Union produced a plane that flew on hydrogen, and I think this was back in the 1980s. So people have been thinking about that for a long time. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. I just turned 61, so if that tells you anything. But I mean, you're talking about a complete seismic shift in infrastructure. How do you produce green hydrogen? All of those things. I don't really expect to see it happen for long-haul flights ever, really. I can see it in urban air taxis where maybe you can switch the batteries out on a e-hang urban air taxi or something like that. But I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. What are you hearing? What do you think about hydrogen?
Well, I think first of all, fundamentally we need all the challenges, all the solutions that are out there to tackle the challenge that we have in decarbonizing aviation. It is one of the most difficult industries to transition to net zero. So all solutions are welcomed. Hydrogen is probably one of those solutions that are kind of more more still some decades in the future rather than available here and now when we talk about hydrogen as a powering the planes. I think Airbus targets to have the hydrogen-powered planes and the models out in the market from 2035 onwards. Clearly, you refer to the infrastructure challenges that will also take time to have the setup in place to enable their use. What I would though highlight is that hydrogen as such and renewable hydrogen can play a role in decarbonizing aviation already before hydrogen-powered planes are here, and that is really as an energy carrier through sustainable aviation fuels. So we can, when we are producing sustainable aviation fuel, as we do as Neste today, utilizing waste and residue oils and fats type of raw materials, our production processes also use hydrogen, and we are working to transition to using renewable hydrogen. And when we are able to do that, we can further improve the environmental footprint of our products. Another interesting opportunity are so-called e-fuels or power-to-liquid fuels. So basically taking renewable hydrogen and captured carbon as a technology pathway to produce liquid fuels and sustainable aviation fuels. Those can start playing a role in decarbonizing aviation already from 2030 onwards. So I think what we kind of see is that hydrogen will contribute to aviation through various means, and these are rather like steps. So we can already take renewable hydrogen to use for technologies to produce SAF that are commercial today. In the next phase, we can use renewable hydrogen to produce power to liquids fuels. And then the third step is to go to actually hydrogen-powered planes, where it is economically feasible, likely the more short mid-haul air traffic than the longer haul distances.
All right. Sami, we're getting close on time, so I want to ask you the last two questions. One, there's always, to me, there's good SAF, there's bad SAF. Palm oil is not, people that use palm oil and all these things, that's not good. I mean, I don't know if you've ever driven from Kuala Lumpur to Singapore, but on the highway, as far as the eye can see on both sides, it's one giant palm oil plantation. I mean, it's just palm oil trees as far, as far as you can see. But your company doesn't, you don't back up a truck to a McDonald's or a Burger King and take all the French fry fat and put that in an airplane. I mean, tell us, you touched on it a little bit, but what are you using to produce your fuel now?
Yeah, so we do not use any palm oil to produce sustainable aviation fuel. So our raw materials for SAF are 100% different waste and residue oils and fats, such as used cooking oils and animal waste fats, as an example. And the benefit of waste and residues is that they really don't compete with the food production and don't require, let's say, increased agricultural land, for example. Also, what is really important is that we measure the benefits of our product always on a life cycle basis, and the value proposition of our solution is that we can deliver up to 80% reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions compared to the use of fossil jet fuel on a life cycle basis. So that life cycle methodology that could be based on the ICAO CORSIA approach, it could be based on the Renewable Energy Directive approach of the European Union, and the calculation approach stipulated in those frameworks fundamentally takes into account the emissions of aggregating the raw material to our refineries, the emissions from producing the fuel, and then also, of course, the emissions from transporting the fuel to the end customers. And when considering those emissions, we are able to achieve that up to 80% life cycle emission reduction.
Great. Sami, I always like to end these on a positive note. If it's possible, from where you sit in Singapore, the SAF industry, is it, are more airlines going to be flying with SAF a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? What's your positive outlook?
Well, so now we are just a few weeks away from Neste starting the world's largest sustainable aviation fuel production facility here in Singapore. So we are expanding our existing refinery, and end of Q1 2023, we will have the capacity to produce million tons of sustainable aviation fuels here in Singapore. So we are well positioned then to serve the demand and the needs of the aviation sector, well, from here in the Asia Pacific region, of course, also globally. So I think that removes the availability challenge of sustainable aviation fuels, and then hopefully encourages, of course, the airlines to drive forward their climate agendas, roadmaps for emission reduction, of course, for the governments to come up with the right policy frameworks to either incentivize or to regulate and require emission reductions from the industry. And then, of course, from the broader ecosystem and the aviation end customers to play a role in tackling their own carbon footprint and contributing to the expenses.
Okay. Sami Jauhiainen, did I get it right that time?
Jauhiainen.
Jauhiainen, okay. Vice President, Renewable Aviation for Asia Pacific at Neste. Thanks for joining me in conversation.
Thank you very much.